Hey guys, got chilly and put on a sweatshirt. Um, let's pick up history on page 214. We have now entered the 19th century, 20th century. We had talked briefly about the two world wars, and we are going to bring into another female leader, this time not a queen, but the very first female prime minister. By the middle of the 20th century, the political power in England had shifted from kings and queens to the prime minister. Prime minister is kind of like a president. When Margaret Thatcher became prime minister in 1979, Queen Elizabeth II was on the throne. Sorry. So Queen Elizabeth II was on the throne, and she still is. She's actually very, very old. But there's a queen and a prime minister. The prime minister has actual power. The queen doesn't really have any power anymore. It's more just like a celebrity, a royal celebrity. They just kind of go around and say things. The queen doesn't really do anything. But Margaret Thatcher is basically like their president. Prime Minister Thatcher worked hard to restore Christian heritage of Great Britain by promoting family values and the private ownership of property. She was very conservative leader. She lined up a lot with many Christian values. She was, I think, a very good leader. Mrs. Thatcher was the most influential prime minister since Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, both very important, very influential prime ministers in the 20th century. And she actually held that position longer than any other British leader in the 20th century. That's important to know. She held that position longer. Her fearless stand for Christian morality and free enterprise helped make Great Britain a better place to live. This was another kind of rise up of Great Britain. Margaret Thatcher bravely faced the problems of the welfare state by insisting that able-bodied people work for their living rather than accept government handouts. So they saw a lot more people working, less unemployment. By turning government-controlled businesses back to individuals, she encouraged thrift and wise management, which meant that many people who had been on welfare could have jobs. For the first time in decades, employers, that means the people that own businesses, could keep more of their profits. What a lot of people want to do, and we would talk about this in the wars package. A lot of people see businesses making a lot of money, and they say, "Man, I wish we could just take some of that money and give it to poor people," which is a nice sentiment in some ways. Kind of not the taking of part isn't really nice, but the sentiment of wanting to care for the poor is a nice sentiment. But think about what would happen if you were a business owner and you're making lots of money, and all of a sudden the government says, we're going to cap what you make at a certain amount, or we're going to take a large amount of what you make. There would be less incentive to come up with new programs and come up with new devices, because you can only make so much money. Why would you even bother? But once they freed it up and they made it so that you could make a lot of money if you were industrious and creative, then people will be more likely to be creative in that. People who had once been on welfare could now have jobs to support themselves and their family. Great Britain, which had been hopelessly in debt as a social welfare state, and obviously because of World War II, began to regain some of her prosperity as the people returned to the Protestant work ethic. As brave as Churchill, Margaret Thatcher faced a foreign crisis when Argentina invaded the British colony of the Falkland Islands in 1982. So this is interesting. I'll talk about this in a second. Although her critics grudgingly admitted that her economic policies were working, many wondered if she could handle a political crisis. Margaret Thatcher appealed to the patriotism of the British. Several thousand citizens of the Falklands, mostly sheep herders from Scotland, were now under the military rule of the Argentine dictator. So what happened essentially was these islands, the Falklands Islands, little small set of islands, and they were settled by the British. And Argentina is actually the nation that lives closest to these islands, and they were saying, they were demanding, they say, we should have these islands because they're close to us, and they're farther away from you, Britain. Originally, they were there was like a French colony and a Spanish colony there, but the French and the Spanish left, and Britain kind of settled there, and they had it for many, many hundreds of years. And then Argentina just recently, in the last, 1982, said we want it. And some people would argue if they were like indigenous people, some people would say, here's a solution, just give it back to the indigenous people. But there actually weren't any indigenous people. By indigenous people, I mean like Indians, Native Americans. There weren't any on the islands. They were uninhabited until Britain, France, and Spain settled there, and then France and Spain left. So it was just Britain there for many years, and so a lot of people came from Scotland, and they would settle there. The accents are very much like Scotland, and so Argentina came and said, "It's close to us. Let us have the land." And and they actually surveyed the people and asked them, "What do you feel like you are part of? More Argentinian or more part of the United Kingdom?" And like every single person was like, "We picture ourselves part of the United Kingdom." So the tough part for the Great Britain is, so Argentina came in, they just took it, they just declared that they owned it, they just declared that that was theirs. The difficult part is Britain could defeat Argentina with its eyes closed and its hand behind its back. It would be easy, but the whole thing is they had to make sure they didn't beat them too badly, because if they just went in and just destroyed all of Argentina, the whole world would like criticize them and say, you guys shouldn't have done that. And so the Falklands War. After a series of naval, air, and ground battles, the Argentine forces were defeated. Many citizens of Argentina saw the foolishness of this war and eventually demanded an end to the military dictatorship. Although some British men had given their lives in conflict, freedom had been restored to the Falklands. Moreover, a refreshing tide of patriotism rolled across the British Isles. So this was a time that people all kind of banded together and were all like, yeah, you know what? We're in the right here. We need to go help these Falklands Islands. And they were all kind of buddy-buddy with one another. And conflicts in Iraq. England sent troops to aid the United States in removing Iraq from Kuwait in 1991. And we talked about that in the Middle East, that Iraq invaded Kuwait, Saddam Hussein, and in freeing the Iraqi people from the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein in 2003. Political ties between the United Kingdom and the United States remain strong. This is basically like modern day. Obviously, Margaret Thatcher isn't there anymore. There have been several prime ministers since then, but we still have a pretty good relationship with England. So the next parts are going to be, what are we at, 7 minutes? I can do the next part. So the rest of England, this is like the geography of England. England, the largest country in the United Kingdom, takes up the greater part of the island of Great Britain. So on the island of Great Britain, England takes up most of it. Scotland at the top, Wales on the side, England right in the middle. A low mountain range, the Pennine chain, runs down the center of northern England and is often called the backbone of England. England's Lake District, west of the mountains, is noted for its scenic hills, beautiful waterfalls, and long, narrow lakes. Many famous poets have lived there, and it's a favorite spot for vacationers. Most of the people of England live in gently rolling plains of the lowlands, which extend over the country. A lot of people live in the country. It's a lot of rolling hills. It's kind of a wet, rainy kind of environment. It's not really hot there. It's kind of similar to around here, maybe a little colder, a little rainier. And so London, England's capital. So England's capital, you need to know that. England's capital is London. And it's the capital of the United Kingdom. It's one of the largest and most important cities in the world. It's like New York City. London, New York City, these are Paris, these are some of the most important cities in the world. It's located on the English Principal River. Now you see this word, it looks like it says Thames, T-H-A-M-E-S, looks like it says Thames River. It's actually pronounced Thames. Why? I have no idea. Pronounced the Thames. So London is on the Thames River, the most important river in England. Near the narrowest part of the English Channel is the Strait of Dover. Dover is famous for its great white cliffs. They have cliffs that are made basically out of chalk. And you can just break off a piece and like write on a blackboard with it. If the weather is clear, a person can actually stand in Calais, which is in France, and look across the strait at the White Cliffs of Dover. If it's a clear enough day, you can actually stand in France at the city of Calais and look over and see England. Which, interestingly, I don't know if you've heard of the the invasion at Normandy during World War II, when America and Britain invaded, and some Canadian Australian forces invaded from the sea, invaded um, German occupied France. They invaded at Normandy, but Hitler thought they were going to come at Calais because it was so close. Next page. The Channel. The Channel is a 31-mile-long tunnel that runs beneath the English Channel linking Great Britain and France. So you can actually get on a train, and it goes underwater, under the ocean, and goes from Great Britain to France. You can actually get on a train, leave the island of Great Britain, and go to France. Pretty incredible. Work began on the Channel in 1987. In 1994, the first high-speed train raced through the tunnel, cutting travel time between London, England, and Paris, France, from 7 hours to less than 3 hours. So it actually goes all the way to France, which is like in the middle of Paris. I mean, it goes into Paris, which is in the middle of France. The English people. Now, these are just more general characteristics of the English. Character. The English people are known for their dry sense of humor. There's literally something called an English sense of humor, British sense of humor. It's just different. They're known for very politeness. Sometimes they can be prim and proper. Their shyness with strangers, their patriotism, their love of freedom, and their respect for tradition. They're very much into tradition. But being prim and proper. Work. England is a highly industrialized nation. Industrialized means like factories and everything. Only about 5% of the people are farmers. You might hear those words, industrialized or agricultural. If a nation has a lot of farmers, it's called a very agricultural nation. Sorry, I just kicked the table. The others, mine coal, work in steel plants, help manufacture ships, planes, or automobiles, or work in the offices, shops, or banks of the large cities. Some help produce England's famous bone china or sterling silver. Customs. The people of England dress much like Americans and Canadians. You're not going to go to England and see like really strange outfits that you haven't seen before. They especially like warm woolens, tweeds, and conservative colors. England is not known for people being really audacious and crazy. Some of their favorite foods are things that I think are gross. Roast beef, not too bad. Cabbage, steak and kidney pie, Yorkshire pudding, and fish and chips. When they say chips, when you hear fish and chips, they actually mean like French fries. Chips to them are French fries. Tea is the favorite hot drink. We have coffee here. Tea is a favorite hot drink. Interestingly, we actually drank tea here a lot until they gave the tea tax, and then it became a patriotic thing during the Revolution to start drinking coffee instead. And so that's kind of why America became a coffee-drinking nation. At 4 o'clock every afternoon, many Englishmen pause for a cup of tea and a snack. At 4 o'clock, it's ding, ding, tea time, and they'll pause for a cup of tea. It's like a very prim and proper thing. Their language. The English people obviously speak English, right? Just like we do. We don't speak American, we speak English. But they speak with a different accent than the people in the United States. Interestingly, their accents. You can find different accents just a few streets away from one another in England, in London. They're very, very particular. Even though it's a tight-knit area, their accents are very, very localized. And they use a lot of different words. For instance, they use, instead of saying gasoline, like we would say, I'm going to put gasoline in my car. They would say, I got to put petrol. A radio they would call a wireless. Like a cell phone they would call a mobile. For an elevator they would call it a lift. Like take the lift to the second floor. Instead of a truck they call it a lorry. With a car they wouldn't say the hood, which is the front, or the trunk, which is the back. They'd say the bonnet and the boot, which is funny. And they're almost looking like a person. The bonnet being like a hat, that's the front of the car, and the trunk would be a boot, which is like the feet. But they call it the boot. Like they'd say, all right, put your suitcase in the boot. A biscuit is a cookie. And a sweet shop is a place where candy and ice cream are sold. There's a lot of other ones, like instead of a bathroom, they would call it like a loo. They'd say, I have to go to the loo. There's just a whole bunch of stuff. They even spell some words wrong. Not wrong, but differently. Like they put a U, like on words that we have I-O or O, they put a U there, like the word color. We spell color C-O-L-O-R. They spell it Colour, or savior, we spell Savior. They spell it Savour. And there are even some words that are different, like we say aluminum, they say aluminium, which is a little interesting. But so just different things. They speak English, but they speak English differently than we do. And they also love sports. The English are known for their love of sports. There's basically two sports that they like the most, or maybe three. Soccer, which is called football in England and really everywhere else in the world, is very, very popular. Cricket's pretty popular. Cricket is kind of like their baseball. They don't have baseball, but they have cricket where they have a bat, but the bat is flattened. It's a flattened bat, and the guy is called a bowler. The pitcher is called a bowler, and he throws the ball, and the whole thing is he throws it as hard as he can, but he bounces it off the ground because there's like a stake there, and the whole thing is he throws it, and he wants it to bounce once and go past and hit the stake, and so he will throw it, and the guy will watch it bounce, and on the bounce, he'll hit the ball with the cricket stick, and then it'll go back and forth from different posts. And they love rugby as well, which is rugby's kind of like football with no pads. The English also enjoy lawn bowling, horse racing, polo, and fox hunting. If you're a sports fan, you might want to check on the encyclopedia to see how some of these English sports are played. Okay, so we're done with England for now. The only thing we have left is we're going to talk about Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, but those are very short sections. So have a good weekend, guys. Make sure you're taking notes.